Today I wanted to show everyone what we've been working on here at Cosive. We're big advocates for MISP. We use it a lot. A lot of our customers use it because we have a cloud-hosted MISP instance, but we wanted to build something into MISP that we could share with the whole MISP community. So what I wanted to show you is something called Insight UI. And the idea of Insight UI is that MISP really is a great data engine and it's a great sharing engine, but it lets you form your own opinions on how to do workflow in it. So what I was hoping to do with Insight UI is to have a few more opinions about how threat intel analysts look at events as they're coming through. What are the telltale signs? What are those things that an analyst looks for first? And how could we rearrange the interface to support that sort of thing better? So the first thing we can do, and you're going to need MISP 2.5.41 or better to turn this on. And we go up here to Global Actions. We go to Themes. And you'll see there's three themes listed here. There's the default, what we're using right now. There's the Overmind UI, and this is something that the Circle team has been working hard on, and we've been collaborating with each other as we've both been working on our themes. And then this is the one we've been working on, which is Insight UI. So I'm going to turn that on now. And you immediately see we're looking at the same data, but we've got a very different view of things. So there's some certain improvements to things like readability. It makes the display a little bit more breathing room, let's say. It rearranges some of the columns, so our titles are now front and center, because I know as an analyst, that's the first thing I'm scanning to decide, is this an event I want to spend more time with and understand better? We can arrange, just like in classic MISP interfaces, I can sort by the last event to arrive in my instance, like this, or I could sort by the last publication time, or the last modification time. And you notice we've also got these sort of human-friendly timestamps now, and if you still want the exact timestamp, you can click that, and you can still copy an exact timestamp if you want. Or I can do last modification time. So I can quickly dig up, and if I want to go and find an event, like this, I'm finding a JP cert event, I can just type it in and very quickly look for titles that I'm interested in. The next thing you'll notice is see how each of these events has these colored bars underneath it. So the concept for this is they're a bit like the color of lettuce. And so a bright green lettuce is really fresh. And so that would indicate, so this one here it got updated 9 days ago in this case. But the date of the event itself is from about 6 months ago. So see how that top bar is looking a little bit less fresh as a lettuce. Whereas the bottom one, this is getting updates. So I wanted to separate that idea of when was the event reported from when did the event get updated, because those are two different concepts in MISP. Some events are continually updated. This one's really old. This is lettuce right up the back of the vegetable crisper, and it's not looking very good. It might be a good event, but as an analyst, I can go like, this could be interesting, but also know that this happened over a year ago. In fact, this is over 2 years ago. So I'll want to bear that in mind as I'm looking. So rather than me having to calculate dates in my head, it's a signal that I can even subconsciously pick up on. So the next thing to go and look at is, let's go and look inside an event. Right, so this event here, let's have a look at how it looks in regular MISP first. We'll turn off the theme. You can always reverse this. And this is the classic MISP view. And all the data is here, but again, it's taking this sort of less opinionated way of what the analyst might want to look at. So all the data is presented in a sort of a linear tabular way. And if I go down here, I could, I've got my reports, I've got my data, but yeah, it's presented in a way that doesn't necessarily suggest the analyst, what should I be looking at first here? So that's really the mission of Insight UI, is more to draw out meaning for the analyst and help do a bit of that work through UI. So the first thing you'll note is that the header sort of gives you the most important things about this event. And for me, that's what's the title? What's this about? The second is, which feed did it come in on? The distribution. MISP has this great sharing model. It uses distribution, whether it's going to stay in my organization, if I'm going to share it with other people on this MISP, if I'm going to let it sync to other MISPs, or if I'm going to share it with particular organizations. So I really wanted to put that front and center, because that's very important for an analyst to know how widely can I unshare this. Next thing is publish state. In MISP, publishing is really important. That tells me, can I use this operationally? Is it ready for use or sharing? So I wanted to make that really stand out. And date is another. The date, as we said before, really important here. So now we move down to the summary screen. So the summary screen is before I start getting into the detail, being IOCs, the IPs, the hashes, the URLs, and all of that. I want to get a bigger feel for what is this event describing, and is it something that I'm going to care about? So what I wanted to do was have events, which have always existed in MISP, but really put those front and center, because an event gives you the glue that binds all the IOCs together, and it gives you the so what. In every good Intel report, we want to say, why should I read this? What's the point of it? If I go and fully process and analyze this report, what does it mean to me and my organization? So as we go through here, we've got a markdown view, and it's calling out all these IOCs. It's calling out sort of certain files, a malware family. As we go down here further, we've got some commands. We've got all sorts of technical indicators. There's some IP and port pairs with comments beside them as well. That's step one. I would want to, as an analyst, read the full report, or skim it at least, and get a sense of the threat here. The next thing that the Insight UI interface does is many MISP events have a URL that describe where did this intel come from originally, but you've had to hunt a little bit through all of the attribute table listings to get it. So now we pull out, if we see there's an external link to a blog, we pull that out, put it right next to the report, because again, that's a thing I'm going to go to want to read. And if I was to go and look at this, I'll see this is the original reporting. The next thing that the summary screen does is a lot of events can and should have good comments next to the attributes. So if there's an IP, what does that IP serve as in this threat, which might be a command and control server, or a hash might be a crypto miner. So we can put comments next to attributes in the MISP data model. So let's pull those out, because even as I read a summary of all the comments in this event, it gives me a sense of what I'm looking at. I've got something with a C2. There's something here called Snowlight, something here called Cross C2. All right, well, those are really important things for me to keep an eye on and understand as an analyst. The next things we can look at is, and MISP has always had a very strong background with tag taxonomies and galaxies. So those all come across, slightly restructured for a bit of readability as well. And as always, I can add my own tags and things like that. So if I wanted to, I could add a workflow tag, just like you could. And if I wanted to say, I'm going to review source credibility, I can add that in there. Galaxies, again, exist as they always have in MISP, but now that they're clustered together. So if there's multiple malware families that might be related, I can group them all together. Or if we had MITRE ATT&CK techniques, I could list them here and they're all visually clustered together, which is a nice way an analyst might like to look at it. Now, one thing that is a bit new that you may not have seen in MISP, but it always actually has existed, is event collections. And I really love event collections because they help my team decide what interests, what priority intel requirements does this event meet for my own organization. So if I was really interested in, let's say, the React to Shell campaign or vulnerability, I could mark specific events with that React to Shell collection that I've created and group them all together. And we might come and look at collections a little bit later, but that's a really important piece of metadata for my organization. Yeah, like I said, always existed, but in the interface, it wasn't very prominent. So now it's got a lot more prominence. All right, let's move to the data tab. And this is really at the heart of MISP, those technical indicators. And there's a lot that the MISP data model can support. But yeah, this has also been rewritten, as you can see, or represented, so that as analysts, we're looking at it in a bit of a different way. So the principle we've used here on the data screen is what they call progressive disclosure, because there's a lot of things we can do in MISP, and that often leads to a lot of controls and buttons on the screen. So instead of that, let's try to stow away a lot of those controls until we need them. So you might, if you're like an experienced MISP user, you might know that there are a lot of buttons often on the screen on the right-hand side of a row. Instead, these now live in here. So if I want to add a galaxy or a tag to an attribute, I can still do all of those things, but it's just hidden away until I need it. The other thing you can do now is if I was to select a variety of attributes here, this bar pops up down the bottom, and I could tag all of them together en masse, or I could edit them all together in some particular way, or add a citing. You can see comments get called out here now, and then where we used to have checkboxes, we've now got like little icons which are either dimmed or lit up depending on, this is IDS, and this one's for correlation, this one's for citing, this one is for distribution. The other part you might notice that's new is this composition bar. So if I'm looking at a new threat, I might go like, oh, interesting. So it's got quite a few hashes, quite a few file names. There's 11 of each, probably paired. But there's some IP addresses here. What are they? Okay, it's these two, and they look like they're C2 servers. So as an analyst, it lets me dig very quickly onto the bits of this threat, this event that I'm most interested in. We could also come back here and we can say, well, how about show me those C2s? And then I can just get the one that matches that comment to pop up. So the whole idea here is to reduce the friction for an analyst to start getting across the event, diving in, working out the most interesting bits, because many events, it might have 100 hashes, but the thing I really care about is the domain name that ties it all together. Like that's the indicator that I'll go and look for versus maybe just the hashes, which might change a lot. The next thing we're going to have a look at is, this is the overhauled correlations screen in MISP. So what we're looking at here are events that have some connection, some common IOC, a common attribute with this JP cert event we've been talking about. What we'll see on the left here is our original event, the one we're looking at now. In the middle, we see attributes. So there's this IP. If I just mouse over that, we can highlight which other events we're talking about, this IP. And if you look all the way over to the right, you can see, well, which feed did they come from? So in this case, we see that the rossi.bin.re feed delivered me all of those events. But it looks like there's some commonality, at least, between this event and all those events. So as an analyst, the next thing I might go do is read about those events. Because this one caught my eye, other events might share a command and control in common, but maybe they're listed as a different type of threat. So the correlation is going to help me discover new events that are going to help me learn about this threat. And I might want to put them in a collection later as well. So the second thing I can do is I can say, well, how about this report? And this is going to tell me how much commonality is there between this JP cert report and this Mandiant report. And we see they've got 3 IOCs in common. So that's a relatively strong relationship between these two reports. Now, the next thing I can do is I can come back to this attribute. And if I click that, I want to do a view across all the events in my MISP instance to see, okay, so what do these other events tell me about this IP address? The first thing I see is that these are comments from other events. And I can compare that to what I think I know about it from this event, but what are other people saying? So this one's saying C2, a malware host, C2. So everyone seems relatively aligned that this is a C2 server. And that's building my confidence that this has got broad reporting, that it might be accurate, and that it is a C2 server. So yeah, really nice to be able to look across events this way to very quickly form opinions about how this IOC is being used or abused. As I look down this list, here are my list of other events that are referencing this. You can see that they're all recommending IDS blocking. So everyone across the board seems to think, yep, we should be blocking that. We can also see they all have correlation turned on. So yeah, I really like this view to being able to understand not just what IOCs are in this event, but what else do I have in my instance collected from other feeds that's going to tell me a bit more here. Now, one other thing to point out, this forms a timeline. So for some types of threat, I might have reporting from 3 years ago and from 3 days ago. So the timeline helps him work out how timely this reporting is. So here we've got 2005 to the end of 2027. And I can see that this report was the earliest. This malware bazaar report from abuse.ch had this hash. And then later on, if I go over to the hash here, I see Mandiant reported that more towards the end of the year. So we saw it so this was the earliest time we saw this, which was in August 2025. So I can see the earliest time that this hash or somebody had reported it. So there's all sorts of different dimensions of analysis that we can do here. And then I can also play around with a few other things that I can rearrange on a big Sankey diagram. This is quite useful because we might want to see this data in different ways, or we might want to filter it down like this and just look at either one particular attribute, or maybe I want to just see what's in one particular report. And if I click any of these reports, I can immediately pivot over to going and have a look at that one now. And I see that this report is also talking about Reactor Shell. It's got a lot of data in it. There's a lot of IPs listed here. And if I do my correlations, I see there's a lot of correlation activity going on here as well. And some domains that you see listed here too. And I can start to dig and dig and dig. And this is how I might spend my afternoon, is if I care about React to Shell as a threat, I can work my way through these correlations and see what different Intel teams, what different feeds are saying about this. All right, so what we might do is go back to our JP Cert event. And the last thing I wanted to show was we briefly talked about collections earlier, which is a way our team can decide, well, which topics that we care about do we want to put this into? And I think this is a great use case for MISP because it often aligns to my priority Intel requirements, which might be something like ransomware attacks against the energy sector in Australia. Then I could make a collection that talks about that. So in this case, I've already added it to a couple of collections. So let's go and have a look at the collections screen, and also notice that in Insight UI, the navigation has been retooled as well to make it a little bit more less menu options at every level. So if we go into collections here, we see that there's this number of topics that I'm interested in, that I'm researching. And we might be looking at APT28 or React to Shell or one of my PIRs. But we're going to look at this React to Shell collection. And what I've been doing is adding this event to a number of collections. And I can see that list. These are all the events that I consider are relevant to React to Shell, React to Shell. React to Shell is here as well. So this is where my team is going to start curating. And so tomorrow, when another team member comes in and is going to help me understand the React to Shell threat and the impacts from it, they'll be able to see exactly what I've been looking at and pick up the thread from there, rather than having to research and rediscover all of this. So it's a really good way for a team to collaborate. So the first thing up here is a timeline. And this timeline looks at, well, when was the most recent report we saw? And it turns out it was that JP Cert report, which was in February. But we've got reporting that goes all the way back here to December 2025. So this immediately gives us an idea of, how long has this threat been around for? Again, time is very important in threat intelligence work. And I can see what people are classifying it as. So I see here, we've got this Sonola XMReg, the one we're looking at from JP Cert. XMRig, there it is again. We've got Etherat there. So we're starting to see how are different threat groups starting to exploit this React to Shell vulnerability, and then what malware families are getting deployed as a result of that. So this is giving me, in this collection, this view across events to describe how is this being exploited in the wild using MISP galaxies. So I quite like that idea. The other one we can have a look at is, again, we can do correlations using a Sankey diagram. So here are all the reports that I have here, and I can see I've got a lot of IOCs that I can work with. And I can see, well, if I have a look at this Microsoft event, it's called out, say, those 6, but then this Wiz report calls out a lot more attributes. And we can start to look at, well, which reports and which feeds are giving me the most IOCs and what's the overlap between them. In future iterations of Insight UI, I'm very keen to build that further, and what sort of other analyses can we do to help an analyst understand what's the common reporting, looking across all the reporters, what are the themes we can pull out from there.